Okay. Right, I think I've got 2 viewers at the moment. I'm going to put out some information this evening. And what I'm going to do is talk about anxiety and panic attacks. I went through a really bad spate of them in 2016, and they started in for me, about 2012. When I stopped drinking alcohol, I got into bad panic attacks and flashbacks from childhood. And it was a really difficult period for me because I was trying to run my business and it's basically stopped me functioning at a high level. So for years, I was functioning at quite a high level, and then I got to a point where I couldn't function anymore at the level I wanted to. And it was due to having flashbacks and anxiety and panic attacks. And there's a lot of people who've not had childhood trauma who do also have anxiety and panic attacks. And I just want to talk about the effects on the body. I'm going to touch in on a book, Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker. And this book is about, this is the map to healing any C-PTSD issues you have. A lot of us, I don't know, for some people as well, I study astrology. So, I look at the past life aspects of anxiety. This is a book called Understanding Karmic Complexes, which can be seen in an astrology chart. It can show, past life stuff, possibly, if we believe that, but everybody's got different beliefs. But on the reality of this life and what we're dealing with right now, I'm going to read some of the effects of what it's like and what anxiety feels like for us. And hopefully, if there's anybody out there watching, if you can hear me, if you can let me know, because I had a problem with my sound the other day. And if you can't hear me, I'm sure somebody would tell me. But there you go. I'm going to read. Okay. So what we've got in the United Kingdom, I live in London, and what we have is something called mind.org. So it's an organization which helps people who've got, mental health issues. And mental health issues doesn't mean that there's something wrong with us. It's, everybody goes through difficult periods in their lives, and a lot of anxiety and pain as adults generally will go back somewhere in our childhood years for many of us. And this is what we have to resolve in order to have a better life. It's terrifying having panic attacks. I went through a really bad time myself where I'd been driving for 25 years plus, and all of a sudden I thought I couldn't drive my vehicle anymore. I didn't want to drive down slopes. I thought if I ran a bath, that even if I ran it with quarter of a bath of water, I got really scared. Thank you for telling me about the sound there, Romfano, thank you. So I went through a lot of fear, and, I'd go to bed at night and I'd have health anxiety, thinking that I was going to die. So I went through a terrible period of deep, deep fear and anxiety, and calling out ambulances as well. I went, every time I sort of had something that felt really odd in my body, I'd call, dial 999 and think that was it, I was going to die. And because I lived on my own, it probably made it worse. But, I wasn't in a position that I'd want to live with anybody, to be honest with you. But it was a really tough time. And I think a lot more people experience this, and then people let on. People can feel very embarrassed about it. I remember getting on, being on the underground in London and feeling anxiety that, I might throw myself on the tracks like that. I'd lose control of myself. So when we hit bottom and with anxiety and panic attacks, we can feel completely out of control and we hyperventilate. And here's some of the effects of some of the effects of anxiety from mind.org. And Romfano is saying, what age were you when you had this down? I'm 53 now, and it was 2014, 15 and 16. And really the last year has been the best year I've had out of it, that I'd say that I'm fully, recovered from that anxiety, and, not fully, but, I'm 95% in a good place. So what does it feel like to have anxiety? And it might sound a bit of a stupid thing to even say that, because we know when we're anxious, but, you know, just to give you a rundown of what mind.org says, and the link's going to be below this video. So I printed this off from their website. So anxiety feels different for everyone. You might experience some of the things listed below, and you might also have other experiences or difficulties that are not listed on this list. Effects on your body. A churning feeling in the stomach, feeling lightheaded or dizzy, pins and needles, feeling restless or unable to sit still or sit down, headaches, backache or other aches and pains, faster breathing, a thumping or irregular heartbeat, sweating or hot flashes, problems sleeping, grinding teeth, especially at night, a feeling of nausea and feeling sick, you know, feeling you need to go to the toilet more often or less often, changes in your sex drive, and having panic attacks. So panic attacks, you know, people have them, and when they have them, it can be, you can absolutely feel that you're going to die, like that's it. So there is a tip that I'm going to give you after I've read this little bit, and then I'll go on to Pete Walker's stuff that I want to tap into. So what helps to manage panic attacks? This is mind.org. It says, panic attacks can be frightening, but there are things you can do to help yourself cope. It could help to print these tips out and keep them somewhere safe and easy to find. So this link that I'm reading here is below this video, mind.org. You can check this list. So during a panic attack, focus on your breathing. It can help you to concentrate on breathing slowly in and out while counting to 5. Stamp on the spot. So you can stamp your foot on the spot. And some people find this helps control their breathing. But I'm going to give you another tip that really kicks in quicker on this panic attack stuff after I've read this. So focus on your senses. For example, you can have some mint sweets, and you can have a mint sweet, and, you know, then you can just focus on the flavor of the mint sweet. This is a tip from this list. Try grounding techniques to help you feel more in control, and they can be useful to when we dissociate and during panic attacks. And then it says also think about self-care. It's important to pay attention to what your body needs after you've had a panic attack. For example, you might need to rest somewhere quietly or eat or drink something. We also might need a friend that we can call when we're having a panic attack, you know, somebody that we can tell. So it says here, tell someone you trust if you feel you're able to. It could help you if you let somebody know that you have panic attacks and that you get them on occasion, that even if you can send them a message and say, I'm having a panic attack, I feel a bit out of control. And particularly if you live on your own, it's really useful to have one person that you can just, you know, you have an agreement with, that when you're in that state, that you can just send them a text and they can, you know, comfort you. I'm going to tell you one that I knew that I did train in something called faster EFT, and the thing that I found it worked for most than my childhood trauma, which, you know, I found that I really had to go into therapy and look at Carl Gustav Jung's work and Pete Walker, complex PTSD from surviving to thriving. I've had people tell me as well, before I do this, that EMDR, I've had a lot of feedback on that people tell me that EMDR is brilliant. So it's not something I've tried yet. I don't feel I need it in my life right now, but it's something that, you know, check that out and, you know, Google it, EMDR, and it's a way of dealing with memories that give us panic attacks, because a lot of panic attacks and anxiety can be triggers from the past. The quickest thing to do for me, when you have a panic attack and you feel like you're going into anxiety, I'll tell you one thing I used to do. I used to think, I went through a period as well, Ronfano, you're asking me there what age I was, but also the other thing I used to do was that I'd eat and I was really afraid that I wasn't going to be able to swallow my food or I was going to choke. And that feeling when you're on your own is completely terrifying, because you just want to enjoy your meal, you want to enjoy your life, but you're stuck in this mode of serious anxiety and panic attacks and feelings like death is looming over you. And I've really dealt with my fear of death over the last year. Like through reading the work of Carl Gustav Jung and understanding the process of what death is about, that we're all going to die. And so, you know, in many ways, it's like, what is the big deal if we go right now, we'll go right now. It's like so it's just accepting, being realistic and accepting the reality of being human, that part of being human is death. And that might sound awful for me to say that if you're afraid or you have panic attacks about that, but in that acceptance, we begin to comfort ourselves. You know, life is a cycle. But what I'd say, if you have a panic attack and you're in a moment and you're having anxiety and you feel you're being sort of fished into a panic attack, just start tapping and on your collarbone area. And this is part of EFT or faster EFT. You can just basically, you know, just tap. That's all you're going to do. Because when you do that, you're putting yourself in touch with your body, and you're slowing down the you're getting the parasympathetic system, the sympathetic parasympathetic system. You're bringing your breathing back into alignment, because panic attacks are where we lose the plot. We start breathing really quickly, and that speeds up all of the biological sort of system in the body. If that makes sense, everything gets speeded up and we can't focus. So the minute we tap, and we're going to stop panic attacks. And it works. It worked for me. It stopped me having them eventually. And if I ever get a moment now where I feel a bit jittery, or that, very, very rare, but if I do, I just tap. And then if you try that tonight on your own after this video, you just sit there, you know, wherever you are, if you haven't, whatever you're doing, and just sit there and just try it. What you're going to find is observe yourself, watch yourself before. Take your hands away from you, just check in with your body, see how you feel, and then tap, and then watch what happens to your breathing. You'll be gobsmacked. You know, that absolutely works on panic attacks, and it brings you back into the now, it brings you back into the moment, and then you'll calm down. But, you know, you might need to do other things. You might need to speak to a friend and say, you know, I'm having a flashback, I'm having a panic attack, and I'm scared, and I think I'm going to die, or whatever it is. We have to verbally ventilate this stuff and share it with others in order to heal it. So the bit from mind.org, I'm going to keep reading. So getting it off our chest seems to help relieve some of the pressure. So we've got to try and manage our worries. And what a lot of us do, you know, we're going into anxiety about things we're not dealing with, because we might be stuck in life, and, you know, we might have problems with our finances. We might have problems with a relationship that's not healthy for us. So we need to deal with our real issues, because, you know, we can tap till the cows come home or whatever, or, you know, go and get anxiety pills. But if we're not dealing with our real issues in life, then we're going to continue the process of not alleviating the real problem. You know, if you've been through abuse and you're still interacting with family members that remind you of that abuse, you might need to address that and look, you know, is this healthy for me? You might live in an area that reminds you of your abuse. You might, you know, be doing a job, or you might be doing something that's just keeping that problem, you know, in its cycle. And we have to break the cycle, you know, no matter how much therapy we have, or, you know, courses we take or books we read, sometimes we're going to have to get really practical in making our changes. Jordan Peterson, some love him, some hate him, like Marmite. He does say one thing as a psychotherapist, or what he would say to people is this when they go to see him. And you can imagine, if you booked an appointment with him, it probably cost you hundreds of pounds, I would imagine, or dollars. What he says to people is, you know, when they go visit him is, or have a session with him, what is the problem and what does the solution look like? We can get so stuck in our problems, you know, and seriously, so many people are having anxiety at the moment and issues with life, because the world is pretty messy. You know, we've got the patriarchy, the politics, you know, our living circumstances, making money to look after ourselves, afraid of our health issues. And I would say, you know, possibly in America, you know, here we have something called a national health system, which means that, you know, if you've got health issues, you go to the government and you get resolved. But I know that in America, you don't have that. You don't, you know, I don't know what the system is exactly, but I hear that you have to pay insurance if you need, you know, you need proper care. And, you know, in the UK, we get that automatically. So I can imagine that not having the resources that we need, it's going to make it much harder for people geographically, you know, depending where they are. If you can imagine that if you know, there are some countries where they're war torn, you know, the anxiety in some of those countries where, you know, there's rape and pillage going on and there's people haven't got food, you know, it's going to the stresses and the strains of being human are really hardcore. And it's, you know, we can only address our own issues. And as we address our own issues, we're making our world a better place, which means that we pass that on outwardly to others around us. But I highly recommend removing the things that do put you under pressure, and, you know, resolving what needs to be resolved. So you really remember this question from Jordan Peterson, which is, what is the problem, and what does a solution look like? Get a notepad and a pen and look at an area of your life that you think, my God, you know, if this problem wasn't here, this is what my life would look like. You know, there's no magic switch or magic button. You know, sometimes we're going to have to go and access help, but we have to know that it is out there. But we've got to verbally, you know, get verbal about it and say, I need help with this. We can't do everything on our own, no matter how much we'd like to. And a lot of people that have been through abuse have got trust issues, so they won't turn to people. They don't feel safe. You know, if we've been abused by our parents, then we don't feel safe to, you know, turn to somebody and say, you know, I'm experiencing this. I'm really in a lot of, you know, emotional pain, and, you know, I hate my job, and, you know, I'm struggling with money, or whatever it is, you know, or I've got a relationship that's really not good for me and I don't know my way out. You know, bit by bit, we can climb out of our own, you know, the hole that's been created, you know, but either through our upbringing or by society as well, with really, you know, unhelpful belief systems that are out there. So then going on with this list, which is below, mind.org, it says, you're getting things off of our chest to release the pressure, because sometimes just having a really good conversation with somebody who understands us, is going to listen, it can change our lives when people, you know, do listen to us. It says here, it can be really hard to stop worrying when you have anxiety. You might have worries that you feel you can't control, or you might feel like you need to keep worrying because it feels useful. So we have to know that worrying about something does not change it on any level. And then also it says, let me read that again, or you might feel like you need to keep worrying because it feels useful, or that bad things might happen if you stop. So I remember thinking that if I didn't worry about something, that something bad would happen. And I used to do really weird things when I had anxiety, like OCD, like I would, you know, for instance, a really silly thing, but I'm going to tell you because we've all got to know that there are normal things we do when we've got anxiety, but we don't understand that we're actually normal. OCD things, like I went through a stage where I believed that when like the bath towels, when you hang them up, you put them over a rail in your bathroom. I used to believe that if I didn't hang them a particular way, or with the label of the towel, the wash label of the towel in a particular way, that something bad was going to happen in my life. And those things, when we do those things and we're counting things, or, you know, checking the taps are off, or, you know, checking that windows are closed or doors, and taking 20 minutes to get out of the house, that's because we're doing that because we're trying to make ourselves feel safe. So OCD is a way of trying to make ourselves feel safe, because if we didn't feel safe when we were children, we would have had to disassociate. So we can have patterns that we brought in from childhood that no longer serve us, that hold, you know, no reality. Like, you know, the way we hang a towel, like you can get a towel and, you know, bundle it up and throw it in the corner of a room, and, you know, it's not gonna affect your life. But it's really strange things can happen when we've got anxiety, C-PTSD, complex PTSD. So I'm going to continue reading. So we've got to try to manage our worries. And one way we can do that is by speaking to somebody who understands us, but somebody who's going to ask us really useful questions as well. So that question I'm asking, you know, I had to ask myself, you know, what is the problem and what does the solution look like? And I'm not perfect at that. Sometimes I'll still remain in my problems a bit, but overall I know, you know, that I'm safe and I'm going to be okay. And then it goes on here. It can be really hard to stop worrying when you have anxiety. So we have read that bit. And then it can be useful to try different ways of addressing these worries and problems. So we've got to realize that there are different ways of addressing our worries and our problems. So it says, you know, we could set aside a specific time to focus on our worries. so you can reassure yourself you haven't got to think about them all of the time, and you can give yourself a timer, you know, for instance. But the best thing would be to look at your worries, write down the list and say, you know, what is this problem? What does the solution look like? And if you can't do it on your own, you know, I've got a ladies group over on Facebook where we support each other. So if you're a lady, you can join that group. It's just for women. And, you know, maybe if you're a guy out there and you know, men that need help with this, maybe set up a group and, you know, begin to help other people, assist them. And, you know, people need each other. This is we need each other. This is so important that we understand this, that we need each other in order to heal our wounds. So mind.org is saying here something like similar to I've said, write down your worries and keep them in a particular place, for example. So you could write down your worries on a post-it note, for instance, or a, you know, an index card or something, and put them in your bag, or, you know, and just keep them there so that you say, these are my worries. You know, one of the worries, I think I'm going to die. And for instance, well, we all know that's going to happen, but worrying about it, particularly when we're healthy and there's nothing wrong with us. If you're worried about something, if you're worried about a health issue, go and get yourself checked out, you know, get the resources together, get yourself a once over checked out, and then eliminate that there's anything seriously wrong with you. And then you can say, okay, you know, what can I begin to focus on now? I do know there are a few brilliant CDs that are hypnosis type that help with that type of anxiety as well. I'll put the links below probably this video a bit later today, after I finish this video. So you can have like something on your phone that you listen to when you go to bed, like a 30-minute audio, which helps to deal with, you know, panic attacks or anxiety. And the last question I'll come back to again, what is the problem and what does the solution look like? So coming back, because I think I showed this book before I had my viewers, I've got a new copy of my complex PTSDs from Surviving to Thriving that arrived today, because my old copy, all of the pages fell out because I'd opened it and closed it so many times that now I just got my new copy. This is the book that's going to help you with C-PTSD. It's very important you get a copy of this if you're healing your childhood trauma. And you can get a free copy on Audible USA on audio, and it's not the author reading it. It's not Pete Walker who's reading it, but it's worth having that. I've got both. I've got a hard copy and I've got the audio, and it's also free on Kindle UK. Okay. The other thing I love to do with my astrology, for those who dropped on after I said this earlier, this is called Understanding Karmic Complexes, to do with past life and regression therapy. And I'm reading this, you know, to do with astrology, which is also, if we believe in past lives, you know, that things have happened in our past that we bring into this life, and it's a continuation, possibly. You know, we've all got different belief systems, but that's something I'm exploring at the moment. Now, I'm going to read a little bit from Shrinking Our Inner Critic, because one of the things that happens when we have anxiety and panic attacks, we will annihilate ourselves via the inner critic. And Pete Walker's book, the first thing he suggests for us when we are healing our C-PTSD, the number one thing we do first is get rid of the inner critic. And I had war with my inner critic, and if you know what the inner critic is, it might sound obvious, but the inner critic is the voice in your head that annihilates you, tells that you're a crap human being, that you're a waste of space, that you're stupid, that there's something wrong with you, that you're never going to amount to much, and that, you know, there's no point in even being here. And the inner critic will do things like, if you think something bad about your abusers or the people that abused you, or your parents, if they abused you, if you think a bad thought about them, the inner critic will tell you that you've got to forgive them. You know, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you over it yet? And what's really going on is that it's the voice that, you know, we would have had arrested development as children. We've not developed properly. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with us. It just means that part of us have not fully developed, because for instance, if we go traumatize a child, right, it's going to have problems. So we have to be gentle with ourselves and love ourselves and get to the point where that inner critic, we get rid of it. And this may sound a bit full on for some people that I'm going to say this, and for others it may not offend. But what I had to do with my own inner critic was I swore at it. I told it to F off. I'd use the F word with it because it was so strong in my psyche. It was so violent towards me. Like if I looked in the mirror, I'd, annihilate myself. I'd, really feel, and I'd get so depressed thinking that I was such a useless person. That's, useless. And yet I had a business. I was employing over, the 35, 40 people at the height of my business, and at the big height of my business, I had 50 employees, contract cleaning in central London. And bit by bit, I began to fall, and I began to fall. Linda Rona says, become emotionally mature. It's very difficult. It's more loving our inner child, Linda. It's not so much, because if I say to myself, I'm not, for instance, that could be the inner critic. Like, if I said, it depends how we look at that, become emotionally mature. Linda's commented on the chat box. So, or is it Linda? It is. So it could be that if I say, I'm not mature enough, I'm not emotionally mature, that could be the inner critic. So what we do is we take our inner child and we begin to treat that inner child with the love, respect, and nurture that it never had. And then when we're dealing with our inner critic, we stop annihilating our inner child and we begin to reparent ourselves. So when we've not had the parenting that's been loving and kind and helped us to evolve into healthy human beings, we've then got to become our own parent. And it's possible to do that. So yes, we do eventually, we need to get to emotional maturity, but it's a process. So we don't want to bash ourselves and say, I'm so stupid, I'm not emotionally mature, what's wrong with me? Because that's the inner critic. So I'm going to read here that a little bit from Shrinking This, the Inner Critic Complex PTSD, to do with Pete Walker's book. He says, in my work with clients, this is him saying this, not me. In my work with clients, repetitively traumatized in childhood, I am continuously struck by how frequently the various thought processes of the inner critic trigger them into overwhelming emotional flashbacks. So what can happen is that the inner critic will trigger us into emotional flashbacks and panic attacks. So this is why we've got to deal with our inner critic first before we do any of the other work. And once we've got that under some sort of control, then we begin to evolve. It's like we're really taking care of our inner child. Thank you for the question as well, for Linda. Thank you, I appreciate. So then he goes on. He says, "This is because the PTSD-derived inner critic weds shame and self-hate about imperfection to fear of abandonment and mercilessly drives the psyche with the entwined serpents of perfectionism and endangerment." So the inner critic will shame us. It will tell us things that are not true. Recovering individuals must learn to recognize, really take this on here, because I did as well. Recovering individuals must learn to recognize, confront, and disidentify from the many inner critic processes that tumble them back into the emotional time of the awful, overwhelming feelings of fear, self-hate, hopelessness, and self-disgust that were part and parcel of their original childhood abandonment. So there can be a lot of shame, a lot of disgust, and a lot of, self-hatred. And that was given to us. That's not the way. If we look at, I saw a beautiful video yesterday that's going around Facebook, and it's of babies that have that are deaf, that have just been given little implants for their ears, and watching the parents like interact. There were about 5 different children, babies, hearing for the first time, and the mothers saying to them, I love you, and just nurturing them. And it touched my heart so much to watch, the proper nurturing that can be given, and that so many people have not been nurtured properly, and we've not been nurtured by generally the people that have been cruel or not nurtured us. They have the same thing, but that does not excuse, we can't just letting people off the hook that have abused us, means that we're not going to heal. We've got to have healthy blame and healthy anger as well. And that can be shocking for people, particularly people in spirituality, because anger is a bad thing apparently, and in religion you've got to forgive and honor your parents and stuff like that, and a lot of that is not truth. You know, it's not natural law. Natural law is, for instance, if somebody attacked me, now in reality I would protect myself, and I would not want to be involved with them, and I wouldn't want to be involved with them, and I would remove them from my life. And we can't do that as children. We've got no choice. So if a parent is abusive, or there's sexual abuse, or there's violence, or there's emotional abuse or verbal abuse, a child can't protect themselves. They can't walk away from it. So we have to see that, you know, there'll come a time when as we do this work and we get the book, there'll come a time when we begin to, you know, soften in our hearts for our own inner child. And then when the pain begins to lift, we'll find, this is what I found, that forgiveness is not even an issue. And also forgiveness does not mean that we've got to hang out with people. You know, clearly, you know, to me, that's obvious, but we can be shamed into, you know, by spirituality and religion, we can be shamed into believing that we're a bad person and there's something wrong with us, because we can't flip that switch into pure forgiveness and loving everybody. We have to realize that in the world, however, that I do believe there are many, many, many more loving people in this world, but there are some dark forces in this world. You can call it what you like, but there are forces in this world that are not healthy, and we have to be aware that that exists. That's just part of the world. So this is the part that we protect ourselves from. And if we're looking after our inner child, then we'll be able to gauge what is healthy for us, what is not healthy. Linda just said something else. She said, inner critic changing your perspective. Yes, that's what eventually happens. I got really, you know, when mine came up, I just tell it to, I'd swear at it. And then I kept doing it. And now I'm amazed how little I criticize myself. So we can have healthy criticism. We can do things like, you know, say, oh, you know, I could do that better. But we've got to realize what's good enough as well. We don't need perfectionism. We don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be perfect to come and sit here, do this video. I'm not going to, you know, do it perfectly. I might say the wrong thing or read a word the wrong way, or I might, you know, feel that my hair wasn't as nice as I wanted it to be, or whatever. It's like, we're all human and we've all got beauty in us. And I think that we've got to give ourselves more credit than we do. And we've got to see what's beautiful in us. If we think when we deal with other human beings in the world, we don't hold a magnifying glass to them and we don't hold them up to perfection. What we tend to do, like if we speak to people in real life, we're not looking at them like looking for fault. We're interacting. There's a softness, there's a beauty about being human, that each of us has something physically beautiful about us. Each of us has, you know, a gift in this world also. So then he goes on, Pete Walker says, the psychogenesis of the PTSD critic. He says, so a flashback-inducing critic is typically spawned in a danger-laden childhood home. When parents do not provide safe enough bonding and attachment, the child flounders in abandonment, fear, and depression. And I know that, you know, as a young child and a teenager, I was severely depressed at home. It was depressing to go home after school. It was depressing. It was so blooming depressing, I can't tell you. And I left home at 14 and a half. You know, my exit was not a pleasant one. You know, it wasn't a choice. It's something that happened, a turn of events. And, you know, I'd been in children's homes a couple of times, you know, left in social services, children's homes. You know, life can be really bloody tough for some people out there. And that's the other thing as well, that we can all have these ideas that, you know, we see our persona on Facebook. You see me right now doing this video. We'll have an idea of what we think somebody's life is about, or, you know, where they've come from or what they are. And we can compare ourselves to others. We don't know anything about other human beings, you know, we don't know what another's reality is. So we've got to stop the comparison game as well. It's great to have a role model. Like at the moment, I love I've been watching Nina Simone, a singer, you know, she was born in 1933, and I've been doing some research on her and looking at her astrology chart, and, you know, beautiful, strong woman, and just very outspoken. She was an advocate, and as well as a singer, through her music, she was an advocate, you know, and helping make the world a better place. So, you know, stopping comparing ourselves to others on all levels, you know, but we can, you know, want to be better, but we don't have to be perfect either. It's good enough, you know, what's good enough. And like we can have, there are parents out there that are good enough parents. I know people that have been through abuse that are more than good enough parent. They're doing good enough parenting, you know, they're loving to their child. Nobody's perfect. Going on. So when parents do not provide safe enough bonding and attachment, the child flounders in abandonment, fear, and depression. Many children appear to be hardwired to adapt to this endangering abandonment with perfectionism. So we got to knock out the perfectionism. And as we knock out that inner critic, we're going to knock out the idea that we have to be perfect. So we can have our bad hair days, you know, we all have them. When we, you know, some days we might look better than other days, and we can, you know, be okay with that and still love ourselves, still look in the mirror and be gentle and loving as we would with a child. And Linda says, I explained this well. Thank you. Yes, I've been researching and I've had to do so much work on myself, Linda. It's not, you know, this is the work that I've had to do. So it's not, it's actual experience that I'm speaking here. Then this goes on. It says, so this is true for both the passive abandonment and neglect and the active abandonment of abuse. A prevailing climate of danger forces the maturing superego to cultivate the various psychodynamics of perfectionism and endangerment. So we can think we've got to be perfect, and also we can feel very scared of life, because if we've had nobody to trust as a child, then we can feel that the world is a dangerous place. And the truth is, the world is quite a safe place, and there are a minority of people that are not safe. And that's the reality. There are 7.5 billion of us, roughly. And, you know, we've got to probably really look at how many people we know and how many people are safe. But if we've had that awful experience of a carer or being abused by a parent or a carer, then it's really messed with our heads. And we have to re-educate ourselves and, you know that we can, that we're safe now, and that, and if we're not, you know, if some of us are continuing in abusive relationships or whatever, we have to look at that. We have to say, what is this problem? What does the solution look like? Because sometimes we will cling on to love, you know, that we think is love, that's not love, because real love is not, you know, it's not painful. We've all got to grow and evolve. So it's quite normal to have confrontation, healthy confrontation with our lovers or our friends or at work, you know, or the healthy criticism. But, you know, there is abuse, and we've got to figure out what is abuse and what is not abuse. And this is a process of learning who we are. So then let's see, I don't want to miss a bit here. So a prevailing climate of danger forces the maturing superego to cultivate the various psychodynamics of perfectionism and endangerment listed at the end of this article. When anxious perfectionist efforting, however, fails over and over to render the parent safe and loving, the inner critic becomes increasingly hypervigilant. So we become hypervigilant and hostile in its striving to ferret out the shortcomings that seemingly alienate the parents. So, you know, we've got to understand that if we've been abused, then it's okay not to like our parents, and it's okay to not, you know, have a relationship with them. We don't have to try and fix something that's broken. You know, I see so many people trying to resolve, you know, where there's been so much abuse, and people are trying, but they keep going into flashback. This is what was happening to me. Kept going into flashback and palpitations and sweaty palms and, like, you know, freaking out. And, you know, we can't force ourselves to do something that we don't want to do. And we have to realize that we don't have to, and that's okay. And what the rest of the world thinks is not our problem. You know, if you've got a friend that says to you, oh, you have to learn to forgive, they're not going to be useful to you unless you believe that. if you've got a friend that's doing that to you, you might have to reevaluate your friendship with them or what you discuss with them. So you don't have to end a friendship, but you have to say, actually, this person, when I have this discussion with them, they trigger me. So it may be, I don't have that discussion with that person anymore because I know what is going to happen, and then they're going to trigger me also. So the more we know, the more we know, and the more we can deal with ourselves. So this is also like the soldiers that come out of combat, over long combat, the PTSD sets in and locks the child into hypervigilance and excessive sympathetic nervous system arousal. So excessive sympathetic nervous system arousal is that we're always on, on the lookout for something bad that's going to happen to us. I know myself, I went through years of out-of-body experiences and nightmares. And for years, I didn't want to go to bed with the light off. What I did, I think it was a year ago, I bought myself, I wish I'd done it years ago, I bought myself a sort lamp with a dimmer switch on it. So now when I go to bed, I go off to bed and I listen to an audible because I'm going off to sleep, and I feel safe and I feel comfortable. I can't sleep in the dark. So, and that's okay. It's like, I'm not going to berate myself that I can't do that. I feel safe with my dimmer switch and my light, and I feel safe. And we've got to create a safe environment for ourselves as well, and have safe friendships as well. So we can be desperate to relieve the anxiety and depression of abandonment. The critic-driven child searches the present and the future for all the ways he is too much or not enough. So for instance, if I'd got tearful or I'd go into flashbacks, I'd begin to apologize to people for that. I'd say, sorry, I'm crying. Sorry, I'm upset. Sorry, I'm in a flashback. And we need people where we don't have to say sorry to them for being our authentic selves. We need somebody that's going to hold our hand, and it's going to be only a few people. But I will say, the more we do our inner critic work, the less reliant we're going to be on others. We're going to know that it's okay that we're having our moment of feeling unsafe, and that we're going to make ourselves feel safe again. So what does he say next? He says, the child's nascent, I don't know if that's the right word, ego finds no room to develop her identity. His or her identity virtually becomes the super ego. So I'm going to explain what the super ego is. If you've heard of the ego, which gets a bashing in spirituality, and it's not meant to. What the ego is it's part of the brain. So for instance, we have our right brain. So when you're a baby, you have your right brain that is, that's the bit that we use. So when we want milk and we want food and we're crying, like you see little baby cry, their right brain, their left brain is not functioning. So we get to a point where we need to understand that the left brain develops later in life, and that the left brain is our analytical side, and the right brain is like, it's like Neptunian. It's like, that's how I would describe it on planetary terms. It's our creative side. So you see little children playing, they'll be using the right brain, which is the dream side and the hopes and the wishes. And the left brain is where we start saying, okay, this is my shopping list. I need to do this. This is where children start being able to add up and put words together. But that takes time to develop. You see it in children. And then the ego is where we'll make healthy choices. Like, I'm not going to drink anymore. My ego, which is my choice maker, is saying, hey, Penelope can't drink anymore because it does this, this, and this. So the ego is not separate to us. It's not something we turn on or off. It's a way of operating in the world. And then we can have an unhealthy ego drives, or we can have healthy ego. So there's in and of itself, the ego is not a thing. It's just something that exists as the air that we breathe. We can't see it. It's just something that's there. And then the super ego, which I was going to come back to, is the parent voice. The super ego is that voice of the parent that's saying, you've got to do this way in order to be, do it the right way. And, we've got to be, aware that we've through abuse, that we've not been able to develop parts of ourselves. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us, which is really important to know. So don't let you believe that C-PTSD is a disorder, because it's not a disorder. It's a response to events, and then we'll begin to unlearn as we go. And so let's see, I forgot. So the other thing is thoughts as triggers. So we've got to look at our thoughts. So here he says thoughts as triggers in extremely rejecting families. So in extremely rejecting families, the child eventually comes to believe that even his or her normal needs or preferences, feelings, and boundaries are dangerous imperfections, justifiable reasons for punishment and or abandonment. In the worst case scenario, where parents use children's words as ammunition against them, the mere impulse to speak sometimes triggers intense feelings of panic. So for instance, you might want to tell somebody, you know, don't speak to me like that. Or you might want to tell somebody that you need something from them. And you might be absolutely terrified to ask, you know, request a simple thing from a friend. You know, I've recently, you know, had something where, you know, there's, you know, if we want to speak to somebody and you say, you know, I need to speak to you, even asking somebody that simple thing that you want to speak to them can be terrifying, because when you ask for your normal needs to be met as a child, they just weren't. So you've got it in you that if you ask and that you're going to be abandoned, there's all of this, you know, huge fear in us. So I'll read this bit. So then he says, where parents use children's words as ammunition against them, the mere impulse to speak sometimes triggers intense feelings of panic. How could anything the child says not reveal his stupidity and worthlessness, not get him deeper into trouble and rejection? As ongoing neglect and abuse repetitively strengthen the critic. So we need to decondition ourselves and, you know, get rid of this inner critic that annihilates us. So even the most, as ongoing neglect and abuse repetitively strengthen the critic, even the most innocuous self-interested thought of musing can trigger a fire alarm of intense emotional flashback to maintain the elusive hope of somebody winning parental approval. So we'll go around, you know, looking for approval when we don't need to as adults. You know, as a decent human being, I don't need another's approval to be myself, or have my own belief system or thoughts or whatever. And I don't need to play down my needs. You know, I need what I need. We've all got different needs, and it's okay to voice what our needs are. So I think that's it for today. I could go on, you know, but what I'm going to tell you is get the book. It's free on Amazon USA, Audible, and it's not the author reading it, and free on Kindle UK. And if you've got any questions, please like the video if you like it. That helps me on YouTube if you've liked my content. And please share this video if you know anybody who's struggling from abuse or has been struggling from abuse. It might be useful to them. And if you're not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe too. And I'll be back in the next couple of days. What page is that on, Linda? What I just read, let me just check what I just read with you. This is going to be from a web page. I'll put the link in the comments below. The parental approval. This is actually from Pete Walker's website that I read that. I wouldn't know what page it is on. I've read that book, you know, several times, but I would say that this link where I'm reading these pages from here, I'm going to put the link below so you can check out the article yourself. Okay, that's what I'll do. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Ronfano, and anybody else that's been watching for me. I appreciate it. Catch you later. I'll be back in a couple of days. Thank you.